Continuing with our ongoing series of classes for the Bnei Noach, we are currently studying from the Encyclopedia Talmudit, the Talmudical encyclopedia, under the entry of Goy. And this article is found in volume Hey 5 of the Encyclopedia Talmudit. And we're up to the subsection of bikarbonis with regards to offering sacrifices. And this would be on page Shin 300. It's on the left-hand column. It's column Shin 300. So now we're going to be discussing the Jewish law that relates to the non-Jew who wants to offer a korban, a sacrifice. Ever since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash of the Holy Temple nearly 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people have been unable to offer any korbanos, any sacrifices. So in the times of the Temple, though, there are daily sacrifices, there are communal sacrifices, and there are all sorts of individual sacrifices that an individual must bring at times, or that he can bring as a donation or as fulfilling a vow and things like that. Likewise, as we're about to see, a non-Jew, a goy, can also participate by bringing certain sacrifices, and that's what we're going to be discussing now. Bakorbanos, with regards to sacrificial offerings. Goy shehiktish behema lekarban. A non-Jew, a goy, who designated, who sanctified an animal, set it aside, as a korban, as a sacrifice. Harei zeh kadosh. Behold, this animal becomes holy, receives the sanctity. Shenemar, and how do we know that a goy has the power to do that? See, if a Jew takes an animal, it has to be his own animal. He can't take someone else's animal. If a Jew takes an animal, and he says, this animal is to be brought as an offering, as a sacrifice. He designates it, or he says what type of a sacrifice. That animal now becomes that sacrifice, and many rules apply, and many restrictions, and that animal cannot be used for any purpose other than sacrificing it. So how do we know that a goy can do the same? Shene'emar, for the verse states, in the book of Leviticus, where it speaks about the sacrifices, Ish v'goymer, asher yakriv karbonoi, l'chol nidreim v'l'chol nidvaisam. Any man, again, it uses the double language which we've had before. It says man, twice, who will sacrifice his sacrifice for all vows or for any donations. A neder and a nedava is an animal which is brought voluntarily. V'amru, and the sages have a tradition, they've interpreted this verse. Ish, man. Ma Talmud loymar ish. Why does the verse state ish twice? Why the repetition? Lahavias hagoyim sheim noidrim b'nedarim u'nedavais ki Yisrael. To include the non-Jews, that they, too, can offer sacrifices voluntarily as a neder, a donation, or rather a vow, a neder, a vow, or a nedava, a donation. V'hekdesham hekdesh, and their sanctifying the animal does in fact make the animal holy. V'oid, and furthermore, shene'emar, we have another verse, also in Leviticus, same chapter, these are both chapter 22, that states, Umiyad ben Nechar, and from the hand of the ben Nechar, which is a term that we've already discussed several classes ago, which is the way that biblically the non-Jew is generally referred to. Most commonly, when we're speaking about a non-Jew, the Torah will usually, in the Bible, the written law, will usually use the word or the term Nochri or something of that nature, something of that root. In this case, ben nechar, which means the son of or a member of nechar, which means a foreigner, outsider. So from the hand of the non-Jew, lo yisakrivu, you shall not offer, es lechem elekechem, the bread of your God, mikol eile, from all of these. So there's clearly a restriction that we cannot accept from the non-Jew. What is that? Shebale mumim lo yakrivu mehem, that if the animal has a blemish, which is what the verse there is discussing, if the animal which is offered, which was designated rather, as a sacrifice, is blemished, you may not offer it as a korban. You cannot bring it as a sacrifice, even if it's from a ben nechar, from a non-Jew. Havel tmimim yakrivu, which clearly implies that if the animal is complete and whole and unblemished, you can bring it. You may bring it. So, just as, generally speaking, if a Jew designates an animal as an offering, as a sacrifice, that animal cannot be a Baal Mum, cannot have a blemish, and that disqualifies it. So too, the non-Jew can also designate an animal as a korban, and if that animal has a blemish, it may also not be brought. Which clearly implies that if it's unblemished, it can be brought. Furthermore, umekablim mehagoy, and we accept from the non-Jew korbanos, sacrifices, afilu shu'eved avodah zara, even if he is an idolater, even if this guy is still currently worshipping and serving other gods, which is a capital offense for a non-Jew, as well as a Jew, of course. Even if he's an oved avodah zara, an idolater, we, the Jewish people, still accept sacrifices brought from that non-Jew. Ve'ein mavdilim bagoyim, and we do not make a distinction amongst the non-Jews. Kederech shemavdilim b'Yisrael, as we do make a distinction by Jews. Shelo lekabel min hamumarim, for we do not accept it from the Jews that are heretics. Shenemar, and we know this because it says mikem, from you, from amongst the Jews. Hashem is saying, with regards to you Jews, I have made a distinction between one Jew and another, not when it comes to the nations of the world. Shebi Yisrael kasuv miut mikem, because when it comes to the Jewish people, there is this extra word which is mikem, from amongst you, and that is coming to make to exclude, and that's excluding the Jew that is a heretic. Aval bakasuv ish ish, but when it comes to the verse that we quoted earlier where it says man man, which is the verse that includes the non-Jew, that he can bring an offering of a donation, that from that verse we derive that non-Jews can offer a donation karbonis just as a Jew. Like kasuv miut, there is no word or expression there used to exclude the idolater. So when it speaks about the Jew, we have a word that says mikem. When we speak about the non-Jew, all we have is the added word ish to include the non-Jew. So practically speaking, that means that if there is a Jew who is known to be, let's say, an idolater, it's a capital offense, it's a terrible, terrible thing, and if there's a Jew who is a known idolater, that Jew now comes and he wants to offer a sacrifice to the one and only God that apparently he believes in as well, besides for whatever other thing that he's doing and serving others, but he also believes in God. And he comes to the Holy Temple and he says, I would like to offer this animal. He sanctified, it was his animal, and he said this animal is to be brought as a korban, as a sacrifice. He wants to donate the animal as a sacrifice. We do not accept it. We do not take that animal and offer it on the altar. However, if the non-Jew is an idolater and he comes along and he offers his animal, we do accept it. And that is all biblical based on the verses. So now that we've established that we do accept sacrifices from the Goyim, Nechleku Tanoim, we are now in the middle of page Shin Aleph, which is 301. So it's the second paragraph on the page, middle of the page. Nechleku Tanoim, there is a dispute between the rabbis, the sages in the Mishnah era. Eze Karban HaGoyim Meviim. Which sacrifice can Goyim bring indeed? Asher Yakriv Karbanoi L'chol Nidreihem U'L'chol Nidvaisam. The verse says that they can offer, they can bring forth a sacrifice for all of their vows and all of their donations, Asher Yakrivu L'Hashem La'oila, which they will offer to Hashem as an oila, a burnt offering. You see, a neder and an edava, those two types of sacrifices, which are both voluntary, they are oila. They get completely burnt and no one eats from it. Ein li ela oila. So now we're interpreting. This verse clearly says that it can be brought as an oila. So I only have here mentioned in the verse an oila, a burnt offering. How do I know to include a carbon shlomim, a peace offering, where part of the animal gets offered on the altar to Hashem, part of it is eaten by the kohanim, by the priests, and part of it is eaten by the person who actually offered it? How do I know to include that carbon? Talmud loymar nidreihem, because the verse says nidreihem, that is a neder. A person can offer a carbon shlomim, a peace offering, by way of a vow. How do I know to include a Thanksgiving carbon? See, if a person had a certain type of either a miracle happened to him, he experienced, or something that he wishes to give thanks to Hashem, special thanks, so he actually can offer a carbon, and this sacrifice is called a carbon toida, giving thanks. How do I know that the guy can bring that carbon? Talmud loymar nidvaisam. From the word nidvaisam, their donations, because a carbon toida is called in a dava. Menayin l'rabbeis esa oifos. How do I know to include birds, an offering which comes from birds, v'esamenochos, and the flour offerings that are not from any animals or birds, but actually the sacrifice is a flour mixture, v'hayayin, and the wine as a libation, v'halavayna, and the frankincense, v'ha'etzim, and the wood, which is put, of course, on the altar to be the fuel for the fire. So that also is serving as part of, it's not really an actual sacrifice, but it's part of it. All these things go along with the sacrifice. How do I know to include all that? Talmud loymar nidreihem l'chol nidreihem, nidvaisam l'chol nidvaisam. Because the verse says for all of their vows and all of their donations, instead of just saying their vows and their donations. So that is being inclusive. What's it including? Everything. Even these things of birds and flour offering and wine and frankincense and wood. So if that's the case, the question now that the sages ask, so why does the verse say for a burnt offering? It seems like it's very specific, and it's only a burnt offering that a guy can bring. So why does it say burnt offering if we're including all these other things? Prat l'nazirus. Because by saying burnt offering, the verse is excluding a very specific case, and that is the Nazirite, that the guy cannot bring. Hainu, meaning chatas ve'oila ushlamim shel nazirus. The sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering of a Nazirite. A Nazirite is a person who on his own, willingly, and it is by choice, took upon himself a very specific vow. And he said that he is becoming a Nazir. And then the Torah says when a person does that, there are a number of restrictions that apply for the period of time that he is in that state of being a Nazir. He may not drink any wine or grape derivatives, can't eat grapes or raisins, can't drink wine or grape juice of any sort. He may not become tamei, lemeis, defiled by a dead body, cannot come in contact with a dead body during that time period at all. Even those people that a kohen could, meaning if it's his own parent or something like that, the immediate relatives, he may not. And he may not cut any of his hair. He cannot get a haircut during that period of time. Now, when he finishes the Nazirus, which generally is a 30-day period, when he finishes that, he then has to go through a process, primarily bringing sacrifices. And they are 3 sacrifices. Chatos, a sin offering. Oila, a burnt offering. And shlomim, a peace offering. That is what is excluded when the verse says that they shall sacrifice as an oila, to exclude the Nazir. Divrei Rabbi Yosei HaGalili. All of the above was the opinion of the Tana, Rabbi Yosei HaGalili. He is the one who says that Goyim can offer everything except for the Nazirite sacrifices. Rabbi Akiva Oimer. Rabbi Akiva says, this is the second opinion, who is clearly arguing with the first opinion that we just mentioned. Rabbi Akiva says, Asher yakrivu la'Hashem lo'oila, the verse that says, that we just quoted, that they shall offer for Hashem as a burnt offering, ein li'ela oila bilvad. That verse is teaching me that the only sacrifice that we can accept from Goyim is a burnt offering. And Rabbi Akiva clearly disagrees with all the other things that Rabbi Yosei HaGalili said. Rabbi Yosei HaGalili said, how do we know that they can bring a shlomim? How do we know they can bring a toida, etc.? And Rabbi Akiva clearly says, no, they may not. You cannot accept from them any type of a peace offering. You cannot accept from them a Thanksgiving offering. And all those other things that he listed, such as the wood and the wine, also we cannot accept from the Goyim. The Yesh Shalomad, now there's someone who learned, Shein Mekablim Ela Oilos, that we can only accept from non-Jews burnt offerings, Mehakasuv, from a different verse. From the verse that says, Umiad ben Nechol Esakrivu es lechem alekechem, that from the non-Jew, you may not sacrifice the bread of your God. Even though we brought down that verse on the top of the page, and there was clearly speaking about not bringing blemished offerings. That verse is talking about not to bring an animal that has a blemish, and it includes the non-Jew, so that means that a non-Jew cannot offer an oila that has a blemish. So why do we learn from there that we don't accept any sacrifice other than an oila, burnt offering? Shekain kasuv, because the verse says, mikol eile, from all of these. Hare memele yoytze mizeh sherak lechem alekechem, shu oila, mekabli mehem tamimim. So it's automatically understood that we only accept from the goyim lechem alekechem, the bread of your God, which means it's totally consumed on the altar. None of it goes to anybody to eat. That's the oila. And that we accept from the non-Jews as long as it's unblemished. Okay, so we basically have two different verses alternatively that we can learn out that we only accept the carbon oila, the burnt offering, from the non-Jew. But that's all within Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Because Rabbi Yosei HaGalili clearly does not learn that way. He says we can accept all karbonis from the goyim, with the exception of the Nazirite. Halacha ki Rabbi Akiva, she'ein mekabli mehem loy shlamim v'loy menachos ela oilos. The halacha indeed follows the second opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that we do not accept from the goyim the peace offering nor the flour offerings, only a karban oila. And we do accept an oila if it's a bird. So we do accept a certain type of a bird offering, but only if it's an oila. So the ruling, the Jewish law is, the halacha, is quite clear and simple, that we accept from the goyim any karban oila. Well, not any, but basically any oila that is brought as a donation, whether it's a vow or whether they want to just donate it, they can do so, and it can be an animal, it could be a bird, so long as it has no blemish. Top of Shin Beis, 302. Ein mekabli mehem chatois vashamois. We do not accept from them sin offerings, nor guilt offerings. V'chein oilois she'einan ba'ois b'neder u'nedava. Likewise, we do not accept from goyim burnt offerings that are not brought by way of a vow or a donation. Going, for example, oilas yiledes, the burnt offering of a woman who gave birth. After a Jewish woman gives birth, amongst the sacrifices that she's obligated to bring, and this is not optional, but it's an obligation, a woman after childbirth, is obligated to bring amongst the sacrifices a karban oila, a burnt offering. So if a non-Jewish woman gave birth, and she wishes to bring a karban oila, a burnt offering, not acceptable. The chayoytze and the like. From the sacrifices that are indeed burnt offerings, but if they're not brought as a donation or as a vow, we do not accept it. So if it's an obligatory sacrifice, such as a woman who gave birth, or any one of the other categories that have to bring the karban oila, we do not accept it from the goyim. V'chol shekein kinei zavim v'zavois she'einam shayochim klal b'goyim she'ein teiras ziva b'hem. And how much more so, we certainly don't accept the bird offerings, which, even though it's a burnt offering, but if it's a bird which is coming for one who became impure by having a particular type of a discharge. So a zav or zava, a man who has a particular type of a discharge, so then he would have to bring a sacrifice. A woman who has a particular type of a discharge, she would have to bring a sacrifice. And that does not apply to non-Jews, because not only do they not bring a sacrifice because they can only bring voluntary sacrifices, not obligatory ones, they don't have anything to do with becoming impure of Zav and Zava. So if a non-Jew has the exact same discharge that the Jew had, the Jew becomes Tameh, the Jew needs to go to the mikveh, the Jew needs to bring the sacrifice. None of that applies to the non-Jew. The non-Jew's status remains the same. The non-Jew did not become any worse or any more impure. The non-Jew cannot go to the mikveh and become pure. The non-Jew certainly does not bring the karban. We don't accept the burnt offering from them. Zaklal. This is the general rule. Kol shu nidar v'nidav. Any burnt offering that is brought by way of vow or donation, mekabli miyadam, we accept it from their hands. Kol she'ein nidar v'nidav, any type of offering that is not brought by way of a vow or donation, ein mekabli miyadam, we do not accept from them. Ve'ein mekabli mehem karbanes chayva, and we do not accept from them obligatory or mandatory sacrifices. Bein shekavu alem zman, whether they have a set time that a person has to bring it, ki oilas re'iyah v'shalmei chagiga, such as the burnt offering or the peace offering, which are brought during the festivals. During the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 annual festivals where Jewish males have an obligation to make the pilgrimage to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple, and that would be during the festival of Sukkot, Tabernacles, during the festival of Pesach, Passover, and during the festival of Shavuos. Actually, the order is Pesach, Shavuos, and then Sukkot. During those 3 festivals, the Jewish man is obligated to come to the temple and to offer certain types of burnt offering and certain types of peace offering. The non-Jew cannot participate in those, even though some of those animals are burnt offerings. Nope, because that is an obligatory sacrifice. It has a set time. Uvein shein kavol zman, or whether it has no set time, but it's obligatory. Kemaiser behema. For example, tithing of the animals. A Jew is obligated to give 10% of his cattle as a sacrifice. And there's a whole process how that's done. He basically gets all the animals that were born that particular year, and he puts them into a barn or a pen, and they're closed in, they're fenced in, and then there's a doorway which is supposed to be just the right size for one animal to go out at a time, and you cause them to come out. You want them to come out one at a time, and as they come out, the Jew, the owner of all these animals, stands there and he counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The next animal comes out, he designates as holy, and he puts something around it that we should be able to remember which animal this is. It shouldn't get mixed into the crowd. So he says, Meiser, that animal is a 10th. So then the animal is put aside, and it starts again counting. Next, the 11th animal, 1, 2, 3, till you get to the 20th animal, and that's animal number 10 again. And so he goes until he's done, whether he's got 100 animals or 1,000 animals or whatever he's got. All those animals now are called Meiser Behema, and he needs to bring those to the Beis HaMikdash, and then it's sacrificed, and part of it is burnt on the altar. Actually all of it. It's a korban oila. That is not accepted. If a non-Jew living in Eretz Yisrael owns a whole big herd or something and he wants to tithe the animals in such a manner, we don't accept it. And that has no set time. So in other words, it makes no difference whether it has a set time or not. The pilgrimage has a set time, the tithing of the animal has no set time, and we don't accept any of them. So the only karbanos that we accept from non-Jews is an oila, a burnt offering, that is brought voluntarily by either neder or nidava. Either a person took upon himself a vow to bring it, or a donation. And that's the halacha. Goy sheshokal, a non-Jew that set aside the half shekel. Now, there is a mitzvah, one of the 613 commandments. This is a biblical commandment for every Jewish man to give an annual donation of a coin of a half a shekel that goes for the to the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, and actually with that half shekel, they put them all together from all the Jews, and from all that money, that will supply them for the next year all of the karbanis tzibur, all of the communal sacrifices. Every day we bring 2 sacrifices, the first sacrifice of the day and the last one, korban tamid, and then on special occasions we bring a korban musaf every Shabbos, every first of the month of Rosh Chodesh, every festival, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. So we have a lot of animals to bring. Already just 2 a day already adds up. So where does all that money come from? Where do those animals come from? It's supposed to be communal. Everybody is supposed to be a participant of that. So that is bought with the half shekel that all those Jewish men donated. If a guy wants to participate, and a guy shakal, he put aside a half shekel. Ein mekablim mimenu. We do not accept it from him. Shenemar, and again we're going to quote the same verse. Umiyad ben neichern, from the hand of the non-Jew, lo yisakrivu, you shall not sacrifice, as lechem alekechem, the bread of your God, mikol eila, from all of these. Ein li ela tmidim shem kriyim lechem. So, it seems to only exclude the non-Jew from the daily burnt offerings that are brought every morning and every afternoon, because those are called your God's bread. Shneimar, because when the verse speaks about bringing these daily sacrifices, it says, as karbani, my sacrifice, lachmi, my bread, liishai, for my fire. So God is calling specifically those daily sacrifices of each morning and afternoon, my bread. So from this verse that says that the non-Jews may not participate, you can't sacrifice my bread, it seems like they're only excluded from the Karban Tamid. Sha'ar kol karbanis hatzibur minayin. How do we know to exclude them from all the rest of the communal sacrifices? We just excluded them from all the rest. That's why they can't give the half shekel. How do we know that they can't have any share in the musaf? Talmud loymar, the verse says, mi kol eile, from all of these. So that's an extra inclusive term, which would seem to be unnecessary in the verse. The verse still makes sense without it, and we know to exclude the Karban Tamid without it, because it says the bread of your God. Why does it add mikol eila from all of these? To be more inclusive, and it's coming to also include all of the communal karbanis. Vafilu ba goyu masar latzibur in mekablim mimenu. Even if the guy comes and he gives the community his half shekel or whatever, we do not accept it. Not only do we not proselytize, or that may not be the right term, not only do we not solicit from them a donation, even if on their own he comes and he wants to give it, and he's actually being kind of aggressive and pushy, we don't accept it. Based on this verse, we're not allowed to permit them to have any part in the communal sacrifices, any and every of the communal sacrifices. Now, if I may be so bold, if you will, what I'm about to tell you now is not written over here. Generally, what we're doing when we're going through this entry, this article in the Encyclopedia Talmudit, I'm really sticking to the text, and we're reading and translating. So what I'm going to say now is not written here, so I want to make that clear. I don't want to mislead anybody. And it's my own humble thinking, and I could be wrong. This is just my own logic. Based on what we just said now, I would think that bringing it to practice, today we don't really have korbanos. Certainly the Jews don't have the korbanos because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. Although imminently we will. I mean, like really, really soon. But until now, for the past nearly 2,000 years, how can we bring this into something practical that applies even without the Beis HaMikdash? So I'm thinking of two examples. Nowadays, one of the many commandments that the Jewish people unfortunately can't do because we don't have the Holy Temple, the Beis HaMikdash, is we cannot do the mitzvah of machzis hashekel. We cannot donate that half shekel annually. It doesn't exist. Can't do it. Whether you live in the land of Israel or in the diaspora, you can't do it. However, there is a custom, and that is that once a year, Jewish men make a donation to commemorate the half shekel. And it's done on Erev Purim. It's done on the eve of Purim. It's done on the fast day of Tainas Esther. And traditionally what's done, being that the original machzis hashekel, the biblical coin, was a silver coin. And it was a half shekel. So you donate half of the currency of the country you live in at the time, and if there exists in silver, then that's even better. So in the United States, we do have silver dollars, and we have silver half dollars. I mean, actually, it has to have been minted, I think, up to 1964, if I'm not mistaken. After that, there isn't any silver in the half dollars. But anyhow, the old ones, the ones from way back, they're silver. So the custom is that annually you donate that to charity. And it doesn't go to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple. So it just goes to charity. You can go to the poor, go to a synagogue, and there are all sorts of customs how to do that. It's actually an obligation for the Jew to do that, but it's not fulfilling this mitzvah, because you can't do it. And how to do it, so there are all sorts of different customs of exactly how to do it. Some use 3 coins, and what you generally do is you recycle the coin, so a person will redeem it. So you put in your money into the pot, you will buy that coin, and you'll immediately put it back in the pot. Then the next fellow comes along, and then he buys the same coins and puts them back in. So therefore, the money accumulates, and you're still using the same coin, just recycling it, because not everybody can come up with a silver dollar every year. And likewise, in whatever country you live in, if there's a coin which is a half, and if it's silver, then that's how you do it. If not, then you just give half of whatever currency it is, whether it's franc, euro, ruble, whatever country, whatever it is. Now, how about if a goy wants to give tzedakah? Okay. How about if the goy is coming to shul on the afternoon before Purim? He's there, comes to shul. He's a regular shul attendee, and he's coming to shul. Okay. And he's going to hear the Megillah at night. He might even have a costume on. He's not disguised to trick anybody that he's Jewish. That would not be good. But he's there, enjoying the festivities. According to what we just learned, I would think that it's not appropriate for him to give the machzis hashekel. He should not go over to that pot or plate or whatever and put in his money and then pick up the coin and put it back in. Because we're doing that to commemorate the machzis hashekel, which we just said that the guy does not give machzis hashekel, and even if he wants to, we're not allowed to accept it. That would be one case. And again, I repeat, this is just my own thinking. The second case, which can be, that's only once a year. The second case can actually come up every week. And that is as follows. You have this guy who attends shul regularly. He comes every Shabbos to shul. And everybody knows he's not Jewish. And he sits there, and he's not keeping Shabbos like a Jew keeps Shabbos, but he's there. And he's doing what he's allowed to do. He's praying to Hashem for whatever. I mean, first of all, he's obligated to pray, as we've discussed in other classes. He's encouraged to. He should. And unfortunately, as of yet, there really isn't there aren't too many B'nai Noach communities that have a house of worship that they properly, so they just kind of have to latch on to just join the Jews. Okay. And in the prayers, what does he say? Well, pretty much he says what's in the prayer book, and he can say it in English. And if he's a really advanced guy, he's even praying in the Hebrew, because he already learned the language. Well, there are certain things that he obviously can't say. For example, in the morning blessings, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, Hashem, Elokeinu, our God, Melech HaOlam, King of the universe, Shaloi Asani Goy, that hasn't made me a goy. I can't say that. I mean, there's a bracha there that the Jewish men say, Shaloi Asani Isha. We thank Hashem that he hasn't made me a woman. And I don't want to get into all that. Maybe I should have even mentioned it. Women, Jewish women, have to skip that blessing. They skip that blessing. A woman in the morning, an observant, religious Jewish woman who does her praying, and she's saying in the prayer book, those first pages of the morning blessings, she has to skip that blessing. She'd be lying. It doesn't make any sense. She can't say that you haven't made me a woman. Okay? Well, in a similar vein, a non-Jew who chooses to say the morning blessings and thank Hashem for giving him his eyesight and his ability to walk and his flexibility and his clothing, etc., etc., He has to skip the bracha that says Shelo Yasani Goy. Fine. But then you go on and we pray. In the prayers, there's a certain structure. Everything is very precise and exact. And I think it's fair to say that he's allowed to say most everything that it says there. There's the blessing that we are thanking God for giving us the opportunity to praise Him. And then we say a whole bunch of praises, which are mostly chapters of the book of Psalms. Okay? And then a bunch of other, a compilation of other places in the Tanakh, in the Bible, the prophets, and in the scriptures. And then we say another blessing. Then we say the Shema. And we have to actually learned in a different class a while back that a non-Jew should say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. And that's brought down in a sicha, in a talk, in an essay from the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach. He brings it down in a footnote from the Chidah, who met a non-Jew and made a whole big deal out of it because that guy he tested him and he interrogated him, and he saw this guy is sincere and he does not believe in anything other than the one and only God. And he's ready to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs. And apparently the Chidah, this great rabbi, was very impressed and excited that he came upon such a person amongst those people there. And he encouraged him, and he told him, he instructed him to say Shema Yisrael every day, which I think is pretty amazing because the verse itself says Shema Yisrael. Be that as it may. How about the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, where everyone stands at attention with their feet together, and they say it in silence. They verbalize it, but it's supposed to be said very quietly that no one should hear you other than yourself. And that's the main prayer, if you will. So, a guy could probably say that. He's in shul, though. It's Shabbos. We have 2 of those in the morning services, Shachris and then Musaf. Based on what we learned just now, I would say that a goy should not say the Musaf. Because the whole purpose of why we're praying this Musaf Amidah is to replace, to the best of our ability, this is what the rabbis did after the destruction of the temple. They instituted prayers to replace these communal sacrifices. That, by the way, is one of the 2 sources for why the Jews have to pray 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, evening, and night. It corresponds to those communal sacrifices that were brought daily. And that's why on a day where if the Beis HaMikdash were standing, such as on Shabbos or festivals, there'd be another communal sacrifice after the morning sacrifice. And that's the Musaf, the additional one. So therefore we say the Musaf prayer. So based on this, I would say that Goyim that are observing Sheva Mitzvahs and are doing a lot of additional mitzvahs that they choose to do, which they're allowed to do, cannot, should not, daven Musaf. But again, I'm not going to say that with absolute certainty as a ruling, but that's my understanding based on what we're learning.
More time for Kiddush Club.
That's right. Aha. Oh, so that would really be the ideal time, again, for whoever's listening over here, that would be the ideal time for your resident non-Jews, Bnei Noyach, that are coming to synagogue, and they're not only coming to serve the Jewish people, to be what's known so well, going way back, to the old country, to Europe, pre-war Europe, the Shabbos Goy, which, most good shuls have a Shabbos Goy, and he's, doing things that Jews can't do on Shabbos. And not only is he coming there to help, but he's coming to serve God because he wants to pray. Fine. But someone's got to set up the Kiddush. Someone, oftentimes, steps out early. There may be a committee, and they're preparing for the refreshments that are going to be served right after the davening. Right after the prayers are over, in many synagogues, immediately after the formal prayers are done, usually it's the rabbi or someone makes the kiddush over the cup of wine, and then it's time to feast, or at least to have refreshments, and to make a toast, to say L'chaim. In some synagogues, it's not so elaborate, and they're just standing around and have some crackers and fish. But in many synagogues, it's much more than that, and some of them actually, it's just amazing how much they have. All right, whatever the case is, there's preparation to be done. Someone's got to cut the food. Someone's got to set everything up. So in some synagogues, there's a committee and some women are doing it, or sometimes some volunteers step out and they do it. But when are they preparing all this? So it would be a nice idea for the goy or the goyim who are in shul to step out and do it then. I'm not saying they're not allowed to be in the synagogue when Musaf is being prayed. I'm not going that far. I'm saying they shouldn't say the Musaf. Don't say the Musaf prayer. So if you're not saying the Musaf prayer, you may as well be helping at that time. And especially if, because you, the non-Jew, is in the kitchen helping, another Jew can be in the synagogue praying the Musaf prayer with the entire congregation, as he should be, then you really did a good thing. But that's just some parenthetical, practical advice, depending on which synagogue you go to and how it's run. And, yeah. But we're in the third paragraph on the left-hand side, Shin Beis, 302. Goy shehevi shlomim, a non-Jew who brought a peace offering. Now, we just got through saying earlier that the ruling is, like Rabbi Akiva, that we do not accept peace offerings from them. They can't bring a peace offering. But here's the guy who did. He's bringing the animal, and he is saying, this is my peace offering. It's a shlomim. Makrivim oisam oilois. We take these animals that he's bringing, that they're bringing, as shlomim, and we switch it. We actually sacrifice those very animals, but not as a shlomim peace offering, but rather as an oila burnt offering. Now, how do we do that? That seems to be perhaps dishonest or deceitful or something along the lines. Here's a guy who's coming and saying, this is my carbon shlomim. And we say, fine, thank you, we're going to offer it. And then we bring it as an oila. That's a different type of an animal. It's a different type of an offering. It's a different carbon. So the reason why we can do that, shehagoy libo l'shamayim, because the guy's intention are for God. He has proper intentions. He means to bring the sacrifice to God. That's why he's coming to the Beis HaMikdash. He's not trying to be an imposter and to, God forbid, bring an offering to some idolatry or some foreign god in the Holy Temple. That's not his intention. We accept that this is an honest, well-meaning guy who wants to bring a sacrifice to God. V'chavanasoi, and his intention is shehei karbonai kolil v'loi sheyei yochel, that his sacrifice should indeed be completely burnt on the altar to God. And he doesn't mean for it to be eaten. So why did he call it shlomim? Doesn't know. He's ignorant. Got mixed up. I don't know. Come up with a dozen different explanations. Doesn't matter. The fact is, we give him the benefit of the doubt. We assume that he wants to do the right thing, and he wants to bring a sacrifice to Hashem, and it has to be totally burnt up to Hashem. Well, that's not a shlomim. That's an oila.
Well, what if he brings a sin offering? Or one of the other type? He makes a mistake. Would it still be done as a burnt offering?
We'll get to there. Good point. So far, if he says shlamim, we say we do oila. But then we're going to get to the next point. Hold on. V'oid shenemar. The verse states, Asher yakrivu l'Hashem le'oila, that they will sacrifice to Hashem as an oila, burnt offering. Kol shemakrivim oila. Whatever they bring has to be an oila. From that verse, we learn out that whatever they bring has to be an oila. Whatever they think it is, whatever they call it, it's got to be oila. Okay. Amar hagoy. How about if the goy said, befeirish, explicitly, shuroit said that he wants shashlomim yeyachlu, that the shlomim shall be eaten. He's not just saying this is the shlomim. He's saying this peace offering of mine, I want it to be eaten. Either he says, I want to eat some of it, or these are the kehana that are on duty right now, these are the priests here, I want them to eat. So he's clearly stating that he wants it to be not only that he's calling it a shlomim, he says, I want it to be eaten. So what do you do then? Kasfu achroinim. So the more recent, later commentators, meaning of the past couple hundred years, they write she'ein mekablim mimenu klal, that we don't receive it, we don't accept it at all. We completely disregard it. We say we're not accepting it. Lefi Rabbi Akiva, shalacha k'moisei, according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that you can only bring an oila. We don't follow Rabbi Yesi Aglili, we follow Rabbi Akiva, that's the halacha, and therefore, we have no choice. So if the guy comes and says shlamim, that's fine, we'll do oila. But if he says it should be eaten, then we say, sorry, we can't accept it. It's sort of like him coming with an animal that has a blemish. We have to reject it. In this case too, we will reject his animal. It's an unblemished animal, but he wants shlamim. No, he's a guy. Now, interesting case. Nodar shlamim. A guy vowed to bring a shlamim, a peace offering, which we said he can't. Or if he does, we make it an oila. But he didn't bring it himself to the holy temple and say, here's my shlamim. Unisanam li Yisrael, and he gave it to a Jew, al minas shizkaper b'm Yisrael, in order that the Jew should have atonement. In other words, the Jew is obligated to bring a shlamim. He has to. Okay? That's part of his atonement. Comes along a guy, and he says, I want to donate the animal. It's my animal, and I'm making it a shlamim, and I want to give it to the Jew, that it should be brought, so to say, on his behalf, or that he should be atoned. Kegoyin, for example, Shehaya Yisrael Mechuyav Shlamim. The Jew is actually obligated to bring a shlamim. It was one of those cases. Whatever the case is. A Jew had to bring a shlamim. And the guy said, I want to sponsor it. I want to sponsor it. This Jew has to bring a shlamim. The animal costs $500. I want to be the sponsor. So the Jew eats it as if it would have been his animal that he paid for. And likewise, if the goy gives the shlamim to the kohen, so that the kohen can have his atonement, then that's also fine, and the kohen could eat it. And the kohen is atoned for. He can sponsor it also on the behalf of the kohen. Af bekarbonis nazir, even by the carbon of the nazir. Now, to remind you, the nazir carbon was the one carbon that everybody agreed. Even Rabbi Yesi Aglili, who said that a guy can basically bring any carbon, he said except for nazir carbon. So even by nazir, where a non-Jew cannot bring any carbon, Imamar Yisrael, if a Jew says, remember, a non-Jew can't become a nazir. The verse says clearly Bnei Yisrael. Okay. So a Jew became a nazir. Fine. And he says, Hareini nazir. Behold, I am a nazir. V'shama goy. And a non-Jew heard him say that. V'omar. And then the goy said, Masha Omar Zeh Olai. What this fellow said is upon me. Now, he didn't say, me too, because that doesn't work. That's meaningless. See, let's divert for a moment. There's a concept of matpis, of attaching yourself to someone else. Like if, let's say, one person makes a certain type of a vow, and then another Jew hears him and says, me too. So generally, me too means that whatever that person just said about themselves and obligated themselves applies to you as well. So if Jew number one says, behold, I take upon myself to be a Nazir, and Jew number two says, me too, that means Jew number two is a Nazir just like Jew number one. Okay. If a Jew says, I take upon myself to be a Nazir, and the Goy next to him says, me too, means nothing. That Goy is allowed to drink wine, is allowed to come in contact with dead bodies, he's allowed to cut his hair. He's not a Nazir. But the Goy didn't say me too. The Goy said, whatever he said is upon me, which means I obligate myself in his sacrifices. He became the Nazir. I am taking upon myself to bring the sacrifices. Mekabelim mimenu. We do in fact accept it. And that Nazir has now got himself a Goy who is the sponsor for his korbanos. She'enoi ella, and the reason, the logic behind this is because this is no more than, it's nothing different than Kipireya Choiv Shel HaYisrael. He's just basically paying the debt of the Jew. If a Jew owes somebody money, anybody can come along and step in and say, I'm sponsoring it. If Jew A borrowed $100 from Jew B, so Jew 3 can come along and say, I'm obligating myself to pay his debt. All right, no problem. Now Jew A is out of the picture, and now the new borrower or whatever that's fine. Same thing with non-Jews. Same thing with a Jew and a non-Jew. So if Jew A borrowed money from Jew B, a non-Jew can come along and say, I take upon myself to pay his debt. That's fine. We could then go into the question, then can the lender charge interest? That's an interesting question. No pun intended. All right? Because you can't charge interest from one Jew to another Jew. And you do charge interest from a Jew to a non-Jew. And here the original borrower is a Jew, but the non-Jew stepped in and said, I will pay his debt. Okay, but that's a different topic. But otherwise, when a Jew owes a sacrifice, for whatever which reason, someone else can sponsor it. And the Jew still gets considered that it's his sacrifice, and he's atoned for it. So, even a Goy can do that. A Goy can sponsor the Jew's sacrifice, even if it's a sacrifice that the Goy can't bring, even if he wanted to, like the Nazirite. So a Jew says, I'm a Nazir, and he becomes a Nazir, and the Goy says, I am going to bring his sacrifices. That's fine. The sacrifices are brought on behalf of the Jew, and the non-Jew does get some kind of credit because he is actually sponsoring it, so it's no more than paying the debt of the Jew. Okay, but that only is going to work with the sponsorship. V'rishonim kasvu, we're on the top of Shin Gimel, page 303. V'rishonim kasvu, shebekarbonis nazir. Now the Rishonim write, that's the earlier commentators of about 1,000 years ago, that when it comes to the actual sacrifices that the Nazarite has to bring, even if a non-Jew brought those sacrifices, they lifter Yisrael Nazir mikarbanaisav, in order to exempt a Jewish Nazir from his sacrifices. Not just being the sponsor, but he brings the animals. Here's a Jew. He just concluded his Nazirus, and a non-Jew comes along and says, I am bringing this animal, this for this Jew. Now, in that case, ein mekablim mimenu, we don't accept it. Because he's not just paying his debt, he's actually bringing the sacrifice. Because for this very reason, there is a very specific exclusion in the verse, where it says, Li'oila, in the verse that we were quoting along, that said, from the hand of the non-Jew, he will accept the oila offering. Which they will bring for all of their vows and donations to Hashem, le'oila. And that is coming to say Prat Nazirus. Even Rabbi Yossi HaGlili used that verse to exclude the Nazirite. Shel Nazirus atzma, that for the Nazirus itself, ain't sarich lema'it. We don't have to exclude them. That verse can't be excluding a goy from becoming a Nazir. Sharein lem Nazirus klal, because there is no such thing as Nazirus by them, because that's already excluded differently, because it says, command the Jewish people. So we know that the guy can't be a Nazir. So what is the exclusion of the guy from in this verse from being a Nazir? Meaning he can't bring the sacrifices on behalf of the Jew. So he could sponsor the Jew sacrifices, but he cannot actually be the one to bring the animal. It can't be his animal that he's bringing. He can pay for it, or something like that. Next. Goy shehevi mincha. A guy that offered a mincha. A mincha is it's an offering that's made of flour. From fine flour. It's not an animal. It's not a living creature, an animal or a bird, but it's a flour offering. So if a guy brings a mincha, kasfu rishonim, so the earlier commentators wrote, shemekablim mimenu, we do accept it, umakrivim oisa kula kalil, and we bring it in its entirety, completely. It is burnt on the altar. Just as we bring their shlamim, their peace offering, as an oila, as a burnt offering. He came and said, here's my shlamim. We said, we take it and we bring it as a burnt offering. Same thing with the mincha. See, the carbon mincha, the way it generally works is, you mix together the flour and the oil, and then they, as they're making it into a dough, there's what's called kemitza, which is a special way of how the kohen grabs hold of a portion of that mixture. That is going to be the part that goes onto the altar and is burnt to Hashem. The rest of it gets, depending on, there's many types of mincha, that's what it speaks all about in the beginning of Leviticus. It gets baked, fried, deep fried, whatever they're doing to it, and then it's eaten. It's eaten by the kohanim. If a guy brings a mincha, we accept it, but none of it gets eaten. The whole thing gets offered onto the altar, not just a three-finger scoop. The Yesha Kasvu, and then there are others that wrote, Shimhevi minchas nesachim, that if a guy brought a mincha, which is called a minchas nesachim, which that is a flour offering that is completely burnt anyway, that would be like the equivalent of an oila, of a burnt offering. Shekula kalil, the whole thing is meant to be burnt on the altar. No one eats it. Mekabli mimenu, that we do accept it because no problem. That would be like an oila. The yesh shenira midivrehem, and then there are those that it appears from what they write, shein mekabli mehem klal, that we don't accept it from them at all. That you don't accept mincha from a guy. So it's something which is not clear. It's disputed amongst the early commentators what to do if a guy wants to offer a mincha. Everyone agrees that no one can eat from it. Question is, do we accept it and burn it completely like we would with his shlamim, or do we not accept it at all? Ein mekablim niske yain min agoy. We do not accept wine as a libation from the goy. A goy wants to donate wine. and he wants to offer it on the altar. Sheiv yoysim b'teiras korban b'fnei atzmai, and he's bringing it as a separate korban. See, generally, in the Torah, there's no such thing in the Beis Hamikdash for a Jew to offer wine as a sacrifice for itself. There's wine brought with every sacrifice, but that's the libation that you pour on the altar, or in a certain hole in the corner of the altar, you pour the wine while the animal is being offered. But there's no such thing as just bringing wine by itself. So how about if the guy wants to just bring wine as an offering? So I want to offer it to Hashem, and I want this to be my sacrifice. We do not accept that. Shneimar b'Parshas Nesachim, for it states in the section where it speaks about these libations, in the book of Numbers, ha'ezrach, it says the resident. Meaning, ezrach mevi nesachim, the resident can bring the wine for libation, ve'en hagoy mevi nesachim, and the goy cannot. Ella, the only thing is though, there is a dispute. There are two different ways. Within the Talmud, there's two different approaches there that the Talmud presents. Whether this statement of not accepting the wine from the goy is only according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that we can only accept oila from them, nothing other than a burnt offering. But according to Rabbi Yesi Aglili, who says we can accept everything, in his list he even said yayin. He said wine in his list of what we can take. He said we accept everything except for the Nazarites korbanos. So makrivim niske goy k'derech makrivim shalmeim, that we do bring the wine of a goy just like we do bring their peace offering. That's one way of learning. In other words, when we say that you can't, it's only according to Rabbi Akiva. Oy, or the other way that the Talmud presents it, Sha'af Rabbi Yesi Aglili, that even according to Rabbi Yesi Aglili, Nismatu, they are excluded, Migzeras HaKosuv Shel HaEzrach, from this biblical injunction where it says HaEzrach, the resident. Meaning this verse is teaching me that we don't accept any wine libation from a goy. Not because of the other verse. No, Rabbi Yesi Aglili says the other verse includes them. He says they could do this, 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 this. But to bring wine as a separate sacrifice, we don't accept from them because of this verse.
As a separate sacrifice.
Yeah. Now we can say, next thing. Hevi hagoy yayin l'nesachim im karbanai. How about if the guy brought wine for a libation with his sacrifice? He's bringing an oila, but he also wants to bring the wine. So he brought the animal as a burnt offering, and he says, and here's the wine I want. After Rabbi Akiva mikablim himenu, then even according to Rabbi Akiva, we do accept it because it's not coming as a separate sacrifice. It's part of his oila, and Rabbi Akiva says oila they're allowed to bring. Shekishamar mikablim himenu oila, for when Rabbi Akiva says we accept from the guy the oila, the burnt offering, oila v'cholashayich loila bichlal. That means the oila and everything which is associated with the oila is included. That would mean the wine for the libation as well. V'chein shaninu. And so we have learned as follows. Yachoil, one might think, is it possible? Loi tehei oilasoi, shel goy. To unanesachim, that the burnt offering of the goy will not require the wine libation. One might think that when a goy brings a korban oila, and we accept it, remember that's the only sacrifice we accept from the goy, is the oila, the burnt offering, but maybe his burnt offering does not require the wine as does a Jew's. Talmud loymar kacha. No, we have a word in the verse, the word is kacha, as such. Meaning le'ikuv, to teach you that it is something which is the English word for it? It means that it's necessary, and without it, it's no good. It's not just optional. It will disqualify it if it doesn't have it, because it says kacha, such, meaning sheyiyu kol oilos te'unos nesachim, that all of the oilos, any time we bring a sacrifice on the altar in the Beis Hamikdash, which is an oila, it has to have nesachim, even if it's the oila of a goy. Pause it for a moment. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Which verse is this found in, this word?
Kacha. It is in Numbers. Verse 13. I believe that's Parshas Shlach. Okay. Ve'echad hadvarim, and one of the things sheiskinu beistin, that the Jewish court instituted, who shegoy sheshalach oilosay mimdinas hayam, if a guy sent his carbon oila from overseas, a guy from America sent over an oila to Jerusalem, to the Holy Temple. V'shilach ima nesacheha, and he sent along with it the wine libation. Krevi mishaloi, then you bring it from the guys. He brought he sent the wine along with, or the money for the wine. V'im lav, and if he didn't, he only sent the animal as his oila, as his burnt offering. Krevi mishal tzibur, then where do you get the wine for it? You need wine, so you take it from the communal money. So the Jewish community pays for that libation as well. In other words, there's no such thing as bringing an oila without the wine libation. And if the oila is coming from the guy, then either he sponsors it or it comes from the general communal fund of the Jews. V'rishaynim kosvu. Now there are early commentators which write, Shein goyim meviim nesachim loy loysayim, that goyim cannot bring the wine for their burnt offerings. They don't pay for their wine. Shenemar, for the verse states, Kol ha'ezrach, only the residents. Avol niskeim krevim mishel tzibur. But their wine, which obviously has to be brought with wine, their wine must come from the community fund. Not that the goy can. As a matter of fact, we do not accept it. The goy cannot because of the word ezrach. V'yesh shemefarshim, and then there are those that explain. Divreihem. What does that mean? Some explain what these rishonim mean. She'ena goy chayev lavi nesachim lo ilasa, that the goy is not obligated to bring the wine libation for his burnt offering. Avalim hevi miritzaynoi, but if he willingly brought it, we didn't solicit it. Mekabelim mimenu, we do accept it. That's how some understand that. V'yesh shekasvu, and yet there are those that write shechayev lavi nesachav, that he is obligated, that the goy must bring the wine or pay for the wine for his burnt offering. The only thing is, what they mean is, we don't force them to do it. He's obligated to do it if he's bringing a burnt offering, but we're not going to compel him. Because, as a rule, a goy is not a person that we, the Jewish people, can compel to do these things. V'yesh shemechalkim, and then further there are others that make the following distinction: bein hanesachim atzmam, whether it's the actual wine itself for the libation, shein hagoy mevi, that the goy doesn't bring it, shu tamei umetame yosam, because a goy is impure and he will defile the wine if he brings it. If he brings a live animal and he says, "This is my burnt offering," no problem. But if he's bringing us a container of wine, he made that impure. Oy lefish nismatu min ha'ezrach, or because they're excluded because of the word ha'ezrach, the resident. Ve'eno yachol akdisham b'ktushas nesachim, and therefore the goy is biblically unable. He doesn't have the power to sanctify them, that they should have the sanctity of libation. He can only do that to an animal to make it a burnt offering, but he can't do it to the wine that's supposed to go along with it. But he could bring money, that he could do. He could pay for the libation wine. So he gives this money to the community, to the communal fund. And then the tzibur, then the communal fund, buys with it the wine and sanctifies it. So he is sponsoring his own wine, but he can't actually bring his own wine. He's got to give the money. The money now has to become communal money for the Jewish people, and then they can buy with that money that he just brought, that we put into the fund, and then we use that money to buy his wine. Next. Ein hagoyim misvadim al korbanesehem. The goyim do not confess when they are offering their offerings. Normally, when a Jew brings a karban, especially if it's a especially if it's a sin offering, he confesses for the sin. Goyim do not say any confession when they bring their sacrifice. Shenemar, for the verse says, "Daber el bnei Yisrael v'gomer v'hisvadu." Speak to the Jewish people, and they shall confess. So the whole idea of confessing for the sin while bringing the offering does not apply to non-Jews. Goy asur b'achilas pesachim. A goy is forbidden to eat the Pesach offering. The Paschal offering, a goy may not participate in that. Shenemar, for the verse states very clearly, Kol ben neichar, again, the same term, any non-Jew, loy yoichal boy, shall not eat in it. That's in Shmois, the book of Exodus, chapter 12, verse 43. That's in the book, in Parshas Boy, where it speaks all about the Paschal offering. V'afa goy b'mashma, and that includes the goy, who's excluded from eating from it. Because the question is the prohibition for the Jew to feed him or for the goy to eat it? A Jew can't give it to him, but what happens if he takes a portion on his own? So we're saying either way it's forbidden. Jew can't give it to him, and he can't take it on his own. And there's actually a whole interesting story in the Talmud about that. How someone was actually caught. Mm-hmm. There was a guy, and he prided himself, so then one of the Chachamim, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, set him up and told him, do they give you from the tail or something like that? And he said, no. He said, they're not giving you the best part. Next time go ahead and demand that you want that part. So when he came, they realized something's up over here, and they did some inquiry, and they realized, ooh, this guy's a guy. He's not allowed to have any part in the Paschal offering. And they ended up that they killed him. So he fell for the setup because he was so proud that he was able to trick the Jews every year and be part of it. So the Paschal offering is not allowed for the goy. Likewise, the goy is forbidden to eat from the peace offering. Because the goy is uncircumcised. And again, as we've discussed in other classes, it doesn't matter if physically the foreskin was removed. Even if it was exactly as it's done to a Jew, it doesn't make a difference. If that organ was completely circumcised, just like a Jew, he is still called uncircumcised. Arel is a term for a non-Jew. The Arel also rekachim. And any Arel, even a Jewish person who's uncircumcised, is not allowed to eat any kachim. So a non-Jew is an Arel, he can't eat any kachim, can't eat any of the sacrifices. Therefore, lahasoiver, the one who holds, shagoy mevi shlamim, that a goy could bring a shlamim, meaning Rabbi Yossi Galili, who says that a goy could bring a peace offering, habas nitin l'Yisrael, but even he agrees that the goy can't eat it. What do you do with that portion? Give it to a Jew. So some of it gets burnt on the altar. Some of it is eaten by the priests. And the portion which the one bringing it would normally eat, but this is a goy, so according to Rabbi Yossi Galili, he agrees that the goy can't eat it, so you give it to a Jew. Milvad, except for hachazeh v'shoik shnitan l'kohanim, except for the breast and the thigh, that has to be given to the kohen as well. Bibchar balmum. Now, what do you do if there's a firstborn animal, which normally the firstborn animal is brought as a sacrifice, and part of it is eaten, and part of it is offered on the altar? But what happens if the firstborn animal has a blemish? It was born with a blemish or it got a blemish. Well, then you can't offer it as a korban. So what do you do with it? If it has a blemish, then nechleku tanoim. Well, I'm sorry. Then if it has a blemish, then it's allowed to be eaten. It's not a korban. You can't bring it as a korban. So if the firstborn gets a blemish, it's a prohibition. A Jew can't do that. If you have a firstborn animal born in your herd, you can't make it have a blemish so that you don't have to bring it as a korban. That's a sin. But if it has a blemish, it got a blemish, then it's edible for anybody. So in that case, when the firstborn animal has a blemish, nechleku tanoim, there is a dispute amongst the tanoim. L'das matirim lezarim, according to those that say that foreigners, non-kohanim, can eat it. And by the way, that is the halacha, that a bechor, a firstborn that has a mum, can be eaten by anybody. So when we say anybody, yesh matir maflagai, some say even a guy can eat it. It's not a sacrifice. Shenemar, for the verse says, katzvi v'chayol, like the deer and like the ram. Matzvi v'ayol mutar l'goy, just as a deer and a ram, a goy can eat, a regular deer and a regular ram. Af b'char balmum mutar l'goy. So too, the Bechor that has a mum is also permitted for the Goy. Because the verse says, what do you do with the Bechor that has a mum? So the verse says, nothing. Don't bring it as a sacrifice. And the way that the Torah presents it, it says the words, it's just like a ram and a deer. So some say, well, can a Goy eat a ram and a deer? Of course. Then you can eat this Bechor, this firstborn. And for that matter, any carbon that became unfit as a carbon, and therefore may be eaten by anybody, some say that includes a Goy. It's no longer holy meat. Otherwise, if it's holy meat, then a regular Jew also can't eat it. The yesh eisim the Goy. And others say no, it can be eaten by any Jew, but not by a Goy. Halacha shemuter mipnei shuchulin. The legal ruling of a halacha is that it is permissible for the Goy to eat it because it's considered like complete non-holy meat. It's like regular meat, and therefore the Goy can eat it. V'yesh me'arishonim soiver, and then there is amongst the Rishonim, the early commentators, that holds shemidrabanan, that rabbinically habasar asur lahachil legoy, that the meat itself, the flesh, is forbidden for us to feed it to the goy. V'chelev mutar, but the fats is permissible. Why? Because the Jew can't eat it. So you're not obligated to throw it out. You don't have to give it to the dogs. You're allowed to give that part to the goy. It's just whatever is edible for a Jew from this non-carbon animal that used to be a carbon and became disqualified as a carbon. So whatever is, since it can't be brought any longer as a carbon, so you can give it to the Jew, but only the part that the Jew can eat. But if you have the forbidden fats of the animal that the Jew can't eat anyway, then they say that you can give to the goy. And going back, even according to those that say that you could give the meat to the goy to eat. What's so funny?
I'd say even the tail piece.
Right. That's right. And even according to those that say that you are allowed to give it to the goy to eat, the flesh itself, Yeshikas, some make the following stipulation. It's only permitted for the non-Jew to eat this meat, which is a blemished carbon or whatever, an unaccepted sacrifice, only if it's by way of inviting him over to eat. You can have him over and give it to him to eat. Have a limkar, you can't, but to sell it to him, or to give it to him as a gift, asur midrabanan, is rabbinically forbidden. Mishum bizayon kachim, because that's considered disgraceful for this. Because after all, this was kachim. This animal was sanctified as a carbon. It just, for some reason, became disqualified. So this bechor, for example, can't be offered as a bechor because it has a mum, it has a blemish. But you can't do something disgraceful with it. So therefore, you want to have a guy eat it. For those that say that you could, that's fine. You got to invite him over, and you can serve him a portion and say, here, this meat was meant to be a sacrifice, but it didn't make it, so here we are eating it. I'm not a kohen, I'm eating it. And you're not even Jewish, you're eating it. But I can't give it to him to take home or something, or sell it to him. And then some argue and say, no, that is permissible. It's completely permissible. So if it's permissible, it's permissible. And they're not concerned that it's considered disgraceful. And therefore, you'd be allowed to give it or sell it to the non-Jew. And they say because we're not to make up any new rabbinic decrees on our own. If it's a rabbinic decree, it's got to say so. Can't make it up. Can't say, well, it sounds like. If you don't find it in the Shas, Even the whole Talmud, there is no such decree. So you see, you're making up a new decree, and that's not acceptable. But very specific. Only when a Jew is allowed to eat it, is it permissible to feed it to the non-Jew. But let's say this sacrifice was actually a terefa. That it's not kosher. Not that it has a blemish and it's not fit for a sacrifice, but it's not fit for any Jew to eat. It became non-kosher. Shasur l'Yisrael, then in that case a Jew can't eat it. Lehuter l'goy, then in that case you can't give it to the goy to eat. V'chein psulei hamukdashim hatzrichim pidyon keshemesu einitrafu. Likewise, if it's a case where the animal, which was meant to be a sacrifice, became disqualified, and it needs to be redeemed after it died or after it became a trefa. It has to be redeemed. Then you can't redeem it and to feed it to the goy. Because it says, and you shall eat it. V'darshu, and the Chachamim learn out from the word ve'achalta that it says ve'achalta v'lei leklavecha. You shall eat it and not for your dogs. V'adin legoy, and the same thing applies to the non-Jew, that in this regard, the non-Jew is in the same category as the dog. So if you have to redeem it, fine, redeem it and eat it, but you cannot feed it to anyone other than a Jew. Karbanas hagoy einam tunim smicha. The sacrifice of a goy does not require smicha. Smicha is when the owner who brings the sacrifice, before they slaughter it, he puts his hands on its head and he presses down with all his might. So the placing of the hands on the head of the animal is not done when a goy offers a korban. Shenemar, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'gemer v'samach. Because the verse which speaks about this mitzvah of placing the hands on the head of the animal says, speak unto the children of Israel, and then it says, v'samach. That's right at the beginning of Vayikra of Leviticus. B'nei Yisrael seimchim, v'ein hagoyim seimchim. That only the Jews do the smicha, and the non-Jews do not. V'af Yisrael yismich b'shviloi. And a Jew should also not do it for and on behalf of the non-Jew. Because the smicha has to be by the owner who's bringing the korban. So if a non-Jew is bringing his burnt offering, he is not to place his hands on the animal and press down, and neither should any Jew do it for him, because the one who does it has to be the one who's actually bringing the sacrifice. And in this case, it's the non-Jew. So there's no point in a Jew doing it for him. Being that we're not going to have a class for about next month, the question is, should we stop here and remember that we're here? I think we'll do that. We're almost done with this sub-division of the entry of Goy, which is about his sacrifices. We're pretty much covering everything that there is about the sacrifices, sort of. So I'm going to make a little notation, if you will. Thank you. We're actually Minchas Goy. Okay. We are leaving off on page Shin Hey 305, third paragraph, Minchas Goy. So there's just the rest of this column and the first half of the next column, and then we're done with the Karbonis part of this section. So until next time, everybody, keep all the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, and be good people and be ready for the coming of Mashiach now.